Imagine you are 32 years old, and you're working the assembly line at an aircraft factory out in California.
Right, just a regular day job.
Exactly. And you're literally manufacturing lavatories for 747 airplanes. But, you write a song on the side.
As one does.
Yeah, as one does. But you can't quite figure out the third verse. So you just, you record a placeholder. You repeat the exact same two words over and over, fully intending to, delete it later and write real lyrics.
Because that's just the scratch vocal, right?
Right. But then the producer tells you to leave it. And that mistake, that placeholder, ends up becoming one of the most defining moments in the history of American music.
It is an astonishing story. And honestly, it perfectly encapsulates the entire era we are looking at today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to take a magnifying glass to the golden age of soul music.
And we have a lot to cover.
Oh, yeah. We have this massive stack of session histories, studio logs, research, and this covers roughly 1960 to 1974.
A hugely transformative period.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we aren't just going to list off a bunch of great tracks for you. We want to show you exactly how these sounds were engineered, the hidden, and frankly, sometimes profoundly dark histories behind the hits.
Yeah, the real human element.
Right. And those invisible threads connecting artists across three defining studio scenes, which are Memphis, Muscle Shoals, and Detroit.
Because, when you listen to these tracks, it is so easy to focus purely on the lead vocal, right? And just the sheer emotion of the performance.
It's hard not to.
Totally. But if you look at the session notes, a totally different picture emerges. You realize that a tiny handful of musicians were functioning as the architectural foundation for an entire cultural movement.
Yeah, the same names just keep popping up.
Endlessly. Booker T. Jones, Steve Cropper, Duck Dunn, Al Jackson Jr., Spooner Oldham, the Funk Brothers.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we even get into those legendary session players, we really have to talk about the one foundational element that ties almost every single singer on this deep dive together.
The gospel roots.
Yes. The Black gospel tradition. Almost every vocalist we are exploring today came up singing in church choirs.
Which is so crucial to understand.
It really is. But for our purposes, that isn't just a cultural background. It brought this highly specific, rigorous, technical discipline to secular pop music.
Oh, absolutely.
You can actually hear it in the physical phrasing. It's the way they sustain these incredibly long, powerful vowels.
Yeah, the breath control alone is wild.
Right. And the instinctive use of call and response. But maybe most importantly, it is their signature style of leaning back into the beat.
That is such a crucial distinction to make for anyone listening to this era. When we talk about leaning back into the beat, we are really talking about micro-timing.
Micro-timing.
Yeah, so in standard pop music, the singer is usually right on top of the metronome. Like when the snare drum hits, the vocal hits at the exact same millisecond.
Right, totally locked in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But gospel-trained soul singers do something different. They wait.
There's a fraction, right?
Yeah, they let the drummer hit the beat, and their vocal arrives a fraction of a heartbeat after the strike.
Wow.
It creates this immense gravitational pull. It makes the music feel, relaxed, but incredibly heavy at the same time.
I love that description. And what is so fascinating is that to really capture that heavy gospel-trained vocal, you have to understand the actual physical spaces where those voices were recorded.
The literal rooms.
The rooms. We were talking about three legendary studio sounds, and they are so distinct that audio engineers can often identify the studio just by listening to the first 4 bars of a song.
Which is a crazy party trick, but it's true.
It really is.
Yeah.
Let's break down the physical mechanics of this. First, you have Stax Records in Memphis. Now, Stax is famous for this incredibly bright, dry, almost urgent sound.
Not very punchy.
Right. And that happened because of the actual room itself. It had a relatively small live room with these hard, reflective wood surfaces.
Right. And for anyone wondering what a live room implies musically, it is all about how sound waves behave.
Okay, explain that a bit.
Well, think of a sound wave like a handful of rubber balls thrown against a wall. In a room with hard, reflective surfaces, those waves bounce back at the microphone almost instantly.
Just boom, right back.
Exactly. And that bounce is called decay, which is just the time it takes for a sound to fade away. At Stax, the sound couldn't decay smoothly.
Because of the wood.
Right. The bounce was fast and harsh, giving the snare drums and the horns this immediate, really sharp attack. It sounded like the band was right in your face.
But then, you travel just across town in Memphis to Royal Studios, and the physics completely change.
Oh, entirely different world.
Yeah. Willie Mitchell, who was the legendary producer there, essentially decided to tune the physical room himself.
And when you say tune the room, you don't mean an instrument.
No, I mean, he altered the architecture, he put down these thick carpets, he angled physical baffles, he even sloped the ceiling.
That is dedication.
Right. He was trying to stop the bass frequencies from bouncing off parallel walls and just, canceling each other out. The result is a much warmer, softer sound with a noticeably fuller bottom end.
Yeah, and then you travel down to Alabama, to Fame Studios and Norala Sound and Muscle Shoals.
Well, Muscle Shoals.
Exactly. And there, the acoustic profile shifts again. You get this rounder mid-range. The producers down there had a habit of pushing the piano and the Hammond organ with those swirling physical rotary speakers right to the absolute front of the mix.
As such a distinct vibe.
It really is. If you put on a pair of really high-quality headphones, you can literally hear these acoustic spaces. High-end listening isn't just about the crispness of the vocal. It is about perceiving the three-dimensional dimensions of the room. You can practically hear the air moving around the microphone.
A great modern example of this physical connection to a room is Dee Dee Bridgewater's 2017 album, Memphis. Yes, I'm ready.
Oh, that's a fantastic record.
It is. And, Dee Dee is a Tony and Grammy-winning jazz vocalist. She came up singing with the Thad Jones and Mel Lewis Orchestra back in the 1970s.
Heavy hitter.
For sure. And for this specific album, she wanted to return to her soul roots. But she didn't just book any modern studio.
No, she knew exactly where to go.
Right. She specifically went to record at Royal Studios, co-producing the record with Memphis saxophonist Kirk Whalum. She sought out that exact physical room to capture its acoustic magic.
I mean, isn't this basically like acoustic terroir?
That is a great way to put it.
Just like grapes absorb the specific flavor of the soil they are grown in, these singers were literally absorbing the wood, the angles, and the dimensions of these specific rooms.
That analogy of terroir is perfect. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can take it even further. Because the wood and the slanted ceilings were really just the soil.
Okay.
The actual flavor of the terroir was determined by the ecosystem of people standing inside the room.
The players. Exactly. These weren't just empty physical structures. They were tightly controlled ecosystems curated by master producers. And the people they brought into those rooms were doing something highly unusual for the time.
Which brings us to the historical backdrop. We're talking about the period from roughly 1965 to 1974.
A very volatile time.
Extremely. Outside the doors of these studios, the country is completely fractured. This is the height of the civil rights movement. You have the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy in 1968.
Yeah, just devastating.
You have the escalation of the Vietnam War, uprisings in Watts and Detroit. Yet, while all of that is happening outside, these studios in Memphis, Detroit, and Muscle Shoals were quietly operating as deeply integrated spaces.
The contrast is truly stark. In Muscle Shoals, you had the Swampers, which was a core group of white Southern session players, serving as the rhythmic backbone for black soul singers. Stax in Memphis was integrated right from its inception. You had white musicians like Steve Cropper on guitar and Duck Dunn on bass, playing shoulder to shoulder with black musicians like Booker T. Jones and drummer Al Jackson Jr.
They were just seamlessly crossing racial and genre lines every single day.
They really were.
You want to know what a typical day looked like for these guys? Let's go back to that guy working at the airplane factory, Bill Withers.
Oh, yes.
In 1971, he releases a track called Ain't No Sunshine on Sussex Records. The lineup on this single song is staggering.
It's an all-star team.
It is. You have Booker T. Jones producing. You have the defining Stax rhythm section, so Duck Dunn on bass and Al Jackson Jr. on drums. And then playing guitar, you have Stephen Stills.
Wow.
As in Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. A folk rock superstar locking in with a Memphis R&B rhythm section, backing up a guy who literally made airplane toilets for a living.
That was the reality of session work in 1971. It was just an astonishing convergence of talent.
Well, I have to push back on this a little bit, or at least ask the question, because I find it hard to wrap my head around.
Sure.
Outside the studio doors, America is literally burning over segregation and racial injustice. But inside, you have black and white musicians so perfectly locked into a groove that they are functioning as a single organism. How did they manage to separate the extreme social tension of the 1960s from the love songs they were recording? Did it just not bleed in?
It's a really crucial question. And the truth is, these session musicians were, in a very practical sense, modeling a reality that the rest of American culture had not yet achieved.
So we were ahead of the curve.
They had to be. They were executing a level of collaboration and mutual respect out of pure musical necessity. The song simply demanded it.
Right.
And we have to recognize that those love songs absolutely carry the weight of that historical moment, even if the lyrics never explicitly mention a protest. Well, for some of these tracks, the love song acts as a sanctuary, like a safe, enclosed space away from the chaos outside. For others, it's a reflection of the profound emotional exhaustion of the era. The tension is absolutely embedded in the grooves, even if it isn't in the lyrics.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because this cross-pollination of talent was so high level, and they were working at such a blistering pace, that even their mistakes became legendary.
Oh, the happy accidents.
Yes. Let's look at placeholders again. Going back to Bill Withers and Ain't No Sunshine, he was inspired to write the song after watching the 1962 film Days of Wine and Roses.
Such a heavy movie.
It is. He was really struck by the way the alcoholic couple in the movie kept destructively circling back to each other. Now, the most famous part of that song is the bridge, where he just repeats the phrase, I know, 26 times in a row.
26 times.
Yeah, and as we mentioned at the top of the show, that was never supposed to be the final vocal.
He fully intended to write a proper third verse. But when they listened back to the take, the producers recognized that the raw rhythm of that repetition conveyed the obsession of the lyric perfectly. They told him to just leave it.
I've always thought of these placeholders as, like, the 1960s audio equivalent of modern software developers leaving a string of test code in an app.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, like, they fully intend to delete it before launch, but then the users get a hold of it and decide that the test code is actually the best feature of the whole program.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The reason these musical accidents worked so well really comes down to authenticity.
Yeah.
They didn't need a polished, perfectly rhymed final verse because the raw emotion in the placeholder communicated exactly what needed to be felt.
It just hits you right in the gut.
Exactly. And you see this same phenomenon with Percy Sledge. In 1966, he recorded When a Man Loves a Woman at Norala Sound in Muscle Shoals, produced by Quinn Ivy.
Classic track.
Right. But at the time, Percy Sledge was working as a hospital orderly. His girlfriend, Esme, had just left him to pursue a modeling career in Los Angeles.
Oh, man.
He was entirely heartbroken. So when he went into the studio, he claimed that he sang the original demo as a complete freestyle.
Wait, really? A
Yeah.
freestyle?
Yes. He just stepped up to the microphone and poured out his immediate, unedited grief over Spooner Oldham's Hammond organ.
That is incredible.
And that raw take became the very first #1 hit to emerge from the Muscle Shoals scene. It proves your point perfectly. The emotion mattered infinitely more than the polish.
It really does. But, you know, we can't talk about legendary placeholders without talking about Otis Redding's Sitting on the Dock of the Bay.
Oh, of course.
The whistling at the very end of that track is arguably one of the most iconic fade-outs in music history. But that whistling was also just a placeholder.
Just a scratch melody.
Right. Otis was planning to come back and write a final verse, and he just whistled the melody to hold the space on the tape.
This raises an important question, though.
What's
Well, if the whistling in Otis Redding's song was left in because he never got to record a final verse, we have to ask why he didn't.
right?
And that pivots us from the magic of the studio directly into understanding how profound tragedy actively shaped the very architecture of this genre.
Yeah, the backstory there is absolutely devastating. Otis Redding recorded Sitting on the Dock of the Bay in early December 1967. And just 3 days later, on December 10th, his plane crashed into Lake Monona in Wisconsin.
Still hard to believe.
He was only 26 years old. Steve Cropper, the guitarist and producer at Stax, was the one who had to go into the studio alone and finish the final mix of the song after his friend had died.
Sitting there with the tape.
He made the heartbreaking decision to keep the whistling in. And it is staggering to think about how much music we lost. I mean, just 2 years prior, in 1965, Otis had recorded the entire Otis Blue album, which he co-wrote with Jerry Butler, in a single 24-hour marathon session.
24 hours. The man was a creative engine.
He really was.
The loss of Otis Redding was a seismic shock, but it wasn't the only profound tragedy that altered the course of the music.
No.
The emotional weight of this era is perhaps best understood through the story of Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell.
Oh, yes.
They were an incredible vocal duo. In 1967, they recorded Ain't No Mountain High Enough, which was written by Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson.
Such a joyful song.
and their chemistry was electric. But in October of that same year, while they were performing a college show in Virginia, Tammy Terrell collapsed on stage, falling right into Marvin's arms.
Wow.
She was diagnosed with a brain tumor. She fought it for several years, but passed away in March 1970. She was only 24.
I mean, to catch your duet partner as she collapses on stage, I can't even imagine the trauma of that. And it completely undid Marvin Gaye, didn't it?
It fractured his world. He was so devastated that he stopped touring entirely for years.
He just vanished from the stage.
Yes, and he took all of that profound, unresolved grief and channeled it into the studio. The result was the 1971 masterpiece, What's Going On?
Which is brilliant.
It is widely recognized as a brilliant political concept album, but at its structural core, it is fundamentally a record of mourning.
Wow, yeah.
He never sang those joyful early pop duets the same way again, but once he processed that grief, it allowed him to transition into a completely different era of his career. By 1973, he is recording at Hitsville West in Los Angeles, co-writing with Ed Townsend, and he releases Let's Get It On.
Which sounds completely different. The mechanics of the production entirely changed there.
They really do. The political introspection gives way to this incredibly layered, sensual sound. And mechanically, this was achieved through heavy overdubbing.
How so?
Marvin would sing a vocal line, rewind the tape, and then sing a harmony perfectly synced over his own voice.
Oh, wow.
He would layer his vocals over and over until it created this thick, enveloping choir of just Marvin Gaye. It feels like a warm embrace.
You see a similar kind of emotional whiplash with Al Green. Earlier, we talked about his 1971 hit, Let's Stay Together, recorded at Royal Studios.
Right, that classic tune.
You have drummer Al Jackson Jr. holding that relaxed gospel groove, and you have that signature bright little upstroke guitar chord played by Teenie Hodges. It sounds so warm, so perfectly romantic.
It's beautiful.
But Al Green's personal life was dealing with incredible darkness. In 1974, a former girlfriend broke into his home in Memphis. She poured a pot of boiling grits on him while he was in the bathtub, causing severe burns, and then she tragically took her own life right there in his bedroom.
Just a horrific event.
That horrific, traumatic event profoundly changed him. He viewed it as a stark sign from God. By 1976, he walked away from secular pop music and was ordained as a reverend. He's actually still preaching today at the Full Gospel Tabernacle in Memphis.
Which is quite a journey.
It is. And, you know, we tend to consume soul music as the ultimate feel-good music or the perfect romantic soundtrack for a dinner party. But looking at the lives of Marvin Gaye and Al Green, is it possible that the deepest, most resonant soul actually requires a collision with profound grief?
The history strongly suggests that. The genre acts as a primary vessel for processing the absolute extremes of the human condition.
Right.
The warm, tuned acoustic blanket of Royal Studios, or the sensual, heavily overdubbed layers of Marvin Gaye's later work. These weren't just aesthetic choices meant to sound pretty on a radio.
No.
They were necessary emotional counterweights. The music had to be that soothing and that structurally beautiful to balance out the real-world trauma these artists were surviving.
What I find so inspiring is that out of this intense emotional cauldron, you start to see these artists radically taking control of the narrative.
Oh, completely.
They stop just singing what they are handed by studio executives, and they start actively reappropriating old pop standards and inventing entirely new song structures.
This is where the genre truly flexes its creative muscle, and it really begins tearing up the established rules of the music industry.
Take Etta James's legendary recording of At Last.
A classic.
It's a total classic. But a lot of people assume that is an original soul song. It isn't. It was written way back in 1941 by Matt Gordon and Harry Warren for a Glenn Miller movie called Sun Valley Serenade.
Very different vibe.
Exactly. It was a standard of what we call Tin Pan Alley, which was basically the centralized music publishing industry that churned out very polite, formulaic sheet music for decades.
Very safe music.
Right. But in 1960, Etta James records it for Argo, a subsidiary of the gritty Chicago R&B label Chess Records. Riley Hampton does the arrangement, and he intentionally uses these sweeping, cinematic 1940s Hollywood strings.
Wow.
So you literally have white Hollywood orchestral scoring transposed directly onto a black voice from a Chicago R&B label. It is this incredibly powerful, quiet act of cultural reappropriation.
She claimed a space that wasn't originally designed for her.
Yes.
Which, adds some context as to why Etta was reportedly so hurt decades later when Beyoncé was asked to sing that song for Barack Obama's 2009 inauguration dance instead of her.
Oh, for sure.
Etta was no stranger to fighting for her place in an industry designed to exploit her. Consider her career rescue in 1967. Chess Records wasn't getting hits with her anymore, so they sent her down to Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals to record with the Swampers.
That ecosystem again.
Right, and she records Tell Mama and I'd Rather Go Blind.
And the backstory on I'd Rather Go Blind really highlights the legal hurdles they faced. Etta co-wrote the song with Ellington Jordan, but Jordan was in prison at the time.
Oh, wow.
And because Etta was tangled up in restrictive contract issues of her own, she couldn't even put her own name on the songwriting credits. She had to register her creative work under her partner Billy Foster's name just to ensure the royalties went somewhere safe.
They had to constantly outmaneuver the system.
Always.
Otis Redding did something similar artistically with the song Try a Little Tenderness.
Oh, I love his version.
It's iconic. But that song was originally a very polite, restrained British standard from 1932, first recorded by Bing Crosby.
Right. Jimmy Campbell, Reg Connolly, and Harry M. Woods wrote it. It was incredibly subdued.
It was almost a lullaby. And in 1966, Otis Redding completely breaks the song open. He starts it almost a cappella, very slowly, honoring the original polite structure.
Lulling you in?
Exactly. And then, utilizing that gospel pacing, he masterfully builds it over 3 minutes into this frantic, horn-driven, controlled burn climax. He took a safe standard and turned it explosive.
If we are talking about artists actively pushing boundaries and creating new formats, we definitely have to talk about Millie Jackson in 1974.
Oh, Millie.
Yes. She records If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right. Now, this song was written by a Memphis team, and Luther Ingram had a standard hit with it in 1972.
Right.
But Millie Jackson takes the song and builds an entire conceptual universe around it. She releases an album called Caught Up. She physically splits the vinyl.
Side A and Side B.
Yes. Side 1 is told entirely from the perspective of the other woman, the mistress. Side 2 is told entirely from the perspective of the wife.
It is a remarkable piece of storytelling.
And she pioneers this technique called the soul rap. Over the groove of the song, she drops into an incredible spoken word breakdown.
Sort of like what Isaac Hayes was doing.
Exactly. Isaac Hayes had done something somewhat similar, but Millie's version was completely raw, raunchy, and unapologetic. The full album version of the track runs over 8 minutes long.
It's an epic.
It really is. By the way, if you ever want to hear the mechanics of this track pop, check out the 2010s remix by Steve Levine.
Who is that?
He is the Grammy-winning producer who did Culture Club's Karma Chameleon. He got the original analog session tapes and enhanced the low-end frequencies for modern speakers while keeping Millie's raw 1974 vocal performance totally intact. It is mesmerizing.
That sounds amazing.
But think about what she achieved. Splitting an album between the wife and the mistress with an 8-minute spoken word confessional? That is basically the 1970s audio equivalent of a true crime deep dive or a reality TV confessional, decades before those formats even existed.
They weren't just singing songs, they were actively tearing up the rule book of popular music formats.
Completely tearing it up.
They took polite, safe standards and made them dangerous. They took simple cheating songs and expanded them into multi-perspective psychological studies. They demanded that the listener engage with the messy, complicated reality of human relationships rather than just tapping their foot to a beat.
So what does this all mean for you as a listener? If we look back at the journey we've just taken, it becomes clear that the golden age of soul music wasn't just some happy accident of talented people singing well.
No, far from it.
It was the result of a rigorous, disciplined gospel tradition meeting highly specific, meticulously tuned acoustic rooms. It was played by uniquely integrated bands who were quietly defying a deeply segregated era out of pure musical necessity.
Absolutely.
It was fueled by the spontaneous brilliance of factory workers and hospital orderlies. It was hardened by real-life grief and tragedy, and ultimately perfected by artists who boldly reclaimed and completely reinvented the cultural standards of their time.
And understanding that context completely changes how we should listen to the music of our own time.
How so?
Well, which leaves us with a fascinating question to consider. If the integrated studio sessions and the raw, unedited placeholders of the 1960s so perfectly captured the hidden anxieties and the unspoken hopes of that specific era,
Right.
what raw, unpolished genre or production style today is secretly recording the historical tensions of our current decade?
Oh, wow.
When listeners look back 50 years from now, what hidden realities will they hear hiding in the background of today's vocal tracks?
That is absolutely something to think about the next time you put your headphones on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of soul. Keep your ears open and remember to always keep listening closely to the spaces between the notes.